Good morning, everyone, says Mr. Tarun. On behalf of everyone, good morning, Mr. Tarun. How are you doing? How is it going for you? Today, we're gonna begin early because what I did was I didn't wait for the LinkedIn link to be sent to people. I figured LinkedIn is not that great for, you know, the whole streaming play anyway. So let's just have LinkedIn going on and just send the link of YouTube because that's better quality and so on and so forth. Although, yesterday when the technical difficulty happened with OBS, LinkedIn stayed intact. For YouTube, I had to start a new stream, not for LinkedIn. But anyway, we are on LinkedIn, we are on YouTube. I've sent the link. Shall we begin? Can you hear me? Yes, you do. Yes, you do, I hope. Batman. Hey guys, we got Batman. Hi, Mr. Batman. How you doing? How you up so early? I thought you worked at you had a night shift, man. Oh man, it's Batman in the house. Batman is enjoying our live stream. I love it. I love it. Don't tell anyone, but I'm also Batman. But anyway, we should. Batman says never slept. Well done, sir. Well done. Great. So we will begin. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things could get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, a daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go! Oh, but before we go, we gotta follow a tradition, right? You know the tradition. The sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does, without fail, every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a copper mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like hot water with some black pepper in it. And here we go. Man, beautiful. Healing. Let's do it again. Loved it. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you are not alone. It says that we are in this together. And that's such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin. Uh, Armani, Giorgio Armani, the Mr. Armani, very favorite, very prominent fashion designer, a legend in the world of fashion designing, has passed away at 91. A lot of respect. He is essentially the what made Mr. Armani very different from everybody else is that he actually looked at cinema as a means of propagating fashion. Now that was always the case, but he was one of the pioneering designers who actually looked at cinema like that. So there was a movie called American Gigolo. It was a Richard Gere movie. Now American Gigolo was actually offered to John Travolta first because it was kind of a musical, right? And John Travolta it was the musical god, right? He had Grease, he had Saturday Night Fever, he had Urban Cowboy, and so on and so forth. So 1976, 1978, 1981, That was John Travolta's time, right? So American Gigolo was offered to John Travolta, but somehow he had done enough musicals, and he got picky with musicals. So two of the very big movies of that time, no, actually three of the very big movies of that time which were offered to John Travolta went to Richard Gere. Okay, now all of these three movies, one was Chicago, one was Officer and a Gentleman, and one was this particular bit, American Gigolo, right? All of these went to Richard Gere. Now he became huge because of these movies, right? But American Gigolo actually brought Armani to the fore, right? So he was one of the like legends of the fashion designing world. I don't have anything to do with that world, as you can probably see. But he's no more. So rest in peace. The legend will live on. Moving on, there's some word on HUL's new chief, Madam Priya. She came from the beauty background, Europe's beauty business and so on and so forth. So they say she's very different from the rest of the chiefs, the previous chiefs of HUL, and she'll lead to good things. Well, we discussed about it. We talked about how this is such a strange thing, right? Such a strange thing that the last chief, the was it Java, whatever his name was, the person, he tried doing a lot of things, right? He tried pushing the volumes up. He tried a lot of things to actually boost HUL's share or solve HUL's problems in India. HUL has not been doing that well, majorly because of the consumption play. Now, India's consumption story has been very lackadaisical since many years, right? Now, as it stayed that way, that chief couldn't really do anything, and he was essentially let go in 2 years, right? 2 years, and then as he was let go, the efforts he had made to turn HUL around, they started moving forward. They started actually showing some results. So the volumes picked up in the last quarter, right? After a very, very long time. Now everything, volumes, and so they started showing the rise, and then he was let go, and then the economy changed altogether, right? The government came out with all the moves to unleash the domestic demand, right? So just imagine how great a part of your career is essentially not in your hands, right? It's just forces beyond your control, right? You couldn't have done anything about the nation's consumption play, right? HUL is essentially a proxy to the Indian consumption story, right? Because it's such a big FMCG company that if you're looking at India and if you're looking at Indian consumption of FMCG, you might just look at HUL and you'll be sorted, right? Few companies, HUL, Colgate, Palmolive, Dabur, and so on. But that guy got fired. This lady's gonna come, and then India's next 2 quarters are gonna be so amazing, and suddenly she'll be the receiver of all that glory, even though she hasn't really done anything about it. So that's what happens. It happens often, and why I mentioned that, I don't mean to, uh, let's say, disregard hard work or disregard personal effort or disregard whatever people think is their effort, so is their story. I'm not disregarding anybody's story. I'm just saying that a large part of what we do is not in our control, so you got to rest easy a little. That's the fundamental sort of takeaway. So just don't take a lot of stress, because you will get fired someday, and once you get fired, everything that you were working on will start working all of a sudden, and then somebody else will take the glory for it. Even if they didn't have anything to do with it, everything you planned it, but you were just not at the right time. So, and sometimes if you are lucky, you will have nothing to do with whatever good is happening in your company or for your company, and suddenly you will be at the center stage drawing all the light, as if you were the genius, right? So the point is to not take yourself too seriously. And this is borrowed from the wisdom that Woody Allen sir gave, right? The whole match point dialogue, the amazing dialogue, which we've talked about a lot, right? I'd rather be the man who said, I'd rather be lucky than good, saw deeply into life. People are often afraid to admit what greater part of life is dependent on luck. They're scared to admit so much of life is beyond our control. It's like in a match when the ball hits the top of the net, and with a little luck, it goes forwards and you win, and maybe it doesn't and you lose, right? And that's that. So, the person who wrote this, Woody Allen, sir, he has he's like the hardest working guy ever, right? Because he's like a 90-year-old person right now, 89, 90. At that age, by this time, he's like written and directed 50 movies. 50 movies. Nobody can claim to have that kind of a body of work in size. 50 movies is just double Martin Scorsese's sir's filmography, right? In fact, if you count Martin Scorsese sir's writing and directions, they'll be in tens, right? And he's like 50 movies. He's been the hardest working guy, but even that guy knows that so much of life is not in your control. So rest easy. It's okay. It's fine. Right? That's the play. Full time movie buff, part time news mental workout. Yeah, I'm a full time movie buff. We talk a lot about movie recommendations, right? So if you want, since we've talked about John Travolta and Richard Gere's most popular movie is Pretty Woman, right? Pretty Woman. It's his most popular movie, right? Julia Roberts, Richard Gere, very good movie, I'd say. Uh, there's a new movie called Anora, by the way, which says it's Pretty Woman of the 21st century. Didn't like it much, but Pretty Woman. So if you want to watch Richard Gere's best movie, I'd say there's a movie called Arbitrage. It's a 2012 movie about a finance mogul. Okay, very good movie, beautiful movie, very insightful movie. It's also about these things, like how these deals happen, and sometimes they happen, sometimes don't, how things just turn around, and sometimes people just find a way. And so brilliant business movie. Not exactly a business movie, it's a family drama, but in the finance world. Extraordinary movie, Arbitrage. uh, and then there's a movie which I might not be, it's probably Unfaithful. Okay, great movie. So Richard Gere, that. And if you want to watch John Travolta, since we talked about the movies John Travolta passed over to Richard Gere, a very underrated movie is Civil Action. A Civil Action, beautiful movie, extraordinary movie, but very underrated. It's about lawyers make money, right? That's where it comes from. Who makes money? Lawyers makes money. Make money. And the second movie I'd recommend of John Travolta is Blowout. Now that's 1981, Brian De Palma. Uh, Extraordinary movie, just like beyond incredible, right? It's about a sound man who figures out that there's been an accident or there's been something else. So, brilliant movie. That is the movie, by the way, Blowout, which led to John Travolta getting Pulp Fiction by Quentin Tarantino. So, when Quentin Tarantino was very young, he watched Blowout and he loved it, right? And he said, "This is the guy I'm gonna." He became a big fan of John Travolta, and when he went to make Pulp Fiction, it was his second movie. The first movie was Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs was a great success. It changed the Hollywood industry forever. Independent cinema became huge because of Reservoir Dogs. So the second movie he was gonna make was Pulp Fiction, and it was a great script. It was hot, right? Everybody wanted to be in Pulp Fiction, but he wanted John Travolta, and people said, "Hey, he's toast, man." By then, in 1990s, John Travolta his career was done, right? So he said, "No, I want John Travolta." And if you believe, if you're concerned about what can happen, just watch Blowout. And if you don't like Blowout, then you shouldn't be producing my movie, because then we don't agree on the definition of what's good. So he liked Blowout so much that he offered John Travolta Pulp Fiction, and the rest is history, right? Pulp Fiction is perhaps the greatest movie of all time. So yeah, let's move on. Since we talked about movies. So Xi, Putin, Kim were hoping I was watching, and I was, says Mr. Trump. A lot of geopolitical rigmarole happening. Everybody's criticizing, chastising Trump for screwing up the India relations, uh, which is essentially understood. Now, what we've been talking about is that Trump is back on the table with India, right? And you should see something like that starting to happen sometime soon, right? So Trump is very frustrated because he really tried hard to stop the Russian war. He met Putin, he met Zelensky, he tried doing everything. He stopped Zelensky's war supply. Earlier in the previous administration, they had given like $150 billion to Ukraine, and there were allegations that most of that money has been laundered because Ukraine is a deeply, deeply corrupt country, right? So he stopped that, and he thought that it's gonna stop Putin, but right after everything, Putin didn't stop, and he was like, "Let's try India," and that didn't work out because they had already tariffed China to the T, right? And if you've already tariffed China to the T, Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, said, we can't tariff China more than this because then it starts hurting us, right? So very, very big times. Midterm elections are coming, so Trump wants to move fast, says Mr. Tarun. Exactly. And the beauty of the midterm elections, this is the first time that RNC is gonna have a Republican Party is gonna have an RNC, the National Convention, before midterms. So National Convention, these people don't have it before midterms. They have it like before the primary, the general elections, their presidential elections. But Trump is a pioneer, in the world of politics. So he started this thing that they're gonna have a midterm Republican National Convention. You know what's gonna happen? Democrats will also have to do it. So once again, Democrats will have to follow Trump as far as political maneuvering is considered, right? So that's what's happening with US. So you should expect, if we are looking into the future, we should expect Trump to be making some moves to court India once again, right? Because everyone in the business world is also not convinced that these tariffs are gonna stay. But at the same time, the Russian war is not stopping, because Mr. Putin recently gave a speech where he said, we are happy with Ukraine joining EU. We never interfered with the idea of Ukraine joining EU, European Union, but we are against the idea of them joining NATO, right? They can't join NATO because NATO is a force which is against Russia. It's a military force against Russia, and we don't want that force to be at our doorstep, right? So Ukraine is that middle country where there's no NATO. So he says, and the areas which are under consideration, right, which are the reasons why fight is happening, there should be a referendum on those areas, right? In those areas, referendum is when you have a vote of the people who will decide where to go, right? Because if you don't have a referendum, you are curtailing people's right to speak the language they like. They are born with. That's Russian. So those areas are what he claims, and then he says that for a referendum to happen, Ukraine will have to put down arms. If Ukraine puts down arms, we'll put down arms. Then people will be there, and that's when the referendum is gonna happen. And if a referendum happens, we are very positive that these people will look at Russia. Now the question is, what is the chance of a peaceful and reliable and proper referendum happening in those areas of Ukraine which are under contention? Zero, zero is the chance of those people, conducting a free and fair referendum, because Ukraine it's not a real democracy. That guy has jailed. It's like in an emergency situation. He's jailed political opponents. This guy has put down, the contrarian press and so on and so forth. So under no circumstances that gonna happen. So nobody knows what's gonna happen, right? So that's that. Moving on, you should expect some good news as far as Trump is considered. Sooner than we can imagine, right? Moving on, companies may fire up output by 25% to feed festive frenzy. Now, this might just seem a bit boring to the viewers of Thinkers Frequency, regular viewers, because we've talked about it so many times, right? We saw this coming like 100 days ago. Don't just know, like all the consumption economy play. So we discussed how the India as a country has two major problems as far as its GDP story is considered, its growth story is considered. Uh, One is obviously domestic consumption. It's not going anywhere. Wasn't until now. And then private consumption, which is essentially, let's say, a precursor or an after effect. I said precursor or an after effect of domestic consumption, right? If there's a lot of private capex, a lot of people get hired, a lot of people start making money, they spend, it leads to consumption. Or if there's a lot of consumption, companies see like, oh, we can start investing, we can start a new plant, sell more stuff. They hire people, more consumption. So that chicken and egg, India never got it right, unfortunately. We got a new life in COVID, during COVID 2020. However, it's been we talked about Mr. Subramaniam Swami's book, Reset, which was launched in 2018, which said that, India is under a tailspin where these two facets are basically dragging each other down, right? So that's what the country is doing by the income tax rationalization, GST rationalization, uh, and everything. So that tax to tame CPI, Consumer Price Index, basically inflation, by 50 to 90 BPS. 50 to 90 BPS, 0.5 to 0.9%. Inflation is gonna go down. That's huge. A comment by Mr. Tiwari. Yesterday's GST cut news, all intraday gains were wiped out, at least on the index level. So that is expected. Why did I say that's expected? Because everything was priced in. So I was having a discussion with a friend who said, अब तो मार्केट बढ़ेगा यार. मैं बोला नहीं भाई, अब तो मार्केट नहीं बढ़ेगा. अब क्यों बढ़ेगा मार्केट? कौन सी न्यूज़ है जो पहले नहीं थी, right? So all of this, everything that happened, right, was priced in. It's not like the government was playing hide and seek because uh, you know something new or revelatory is gonna come out. No, the government was pretty clear that it's gonna do this, right? 99% of everything was gonna go to the 5% slab, 28 to 18 sin tax, or let's say the whole tobacco and sin industry. They were gonna go out. What was surprising was the ban on real money gaming. Now, why that ban on real money gaming right before the festive season? Because festive season takes a lot of bets, right? And that bet could be going to a more productive play, right? Consumption play. So it was all coordinated, and if anybody paid any attention, which I'm sure traders did, they knew what was happening. The only thing that I was very curious about was the smartphone play, right? Like if smartphones had gotten some sort of a GST exemption, I mean, to a lower slab, that would have been huge, right? Because this sheer bulk of that industry would have changed a lot. But otherwise, the cinema guys were saying, sir, 300 rupees se niche GST. No, it's just 100 rupees. No, film industry is not gonna get affected, right? With the 100 rupee, no ticket is priced under 100 anymore. So more or less, the GST played exactly how it happened, and then why would the market pick up, right? It was time to book profits, essentially. Now, another aspect is that people are saying, how much of growth will this lead to? Okay, what is the growth that this particular Batman Mr. Batman says, still don't think most of the benefit would be passed to the consumer. For example, the insurance premium would be increased by the same rate as much as GST has been exempted. Oh no, Mr. Batman, not at all. That's what the government is saying. The government is saying every ministry needs to be very careful uh, so that the anti-profiteering doesn't ruin this whole play. The government says is going. If you want to screw this up, we're not going to leave you, man. So every consumption play, even insurance premium especially, uh, they're very sure that the government says that you cannot do this, right? All these things need to be passed on to the consumers. In some cases, let's say if you're talking about drone manufacturers, right? So they're saying drone manufacturing is essentially uh, a lot of what they're going to save on the GST play, they're going to put it in R&D. Still the price is going to come down. That's how they're talking about, right? Tax tweak to tame CPI by 50 to 90 BPS. That means the price of things is going to come down. Now the price of things can come down in two ways. We've talked about this. The shrinkflation play, right? So there's something called shrinkflation, that an FMCG company selling Parle G, right? It cannot like reduce the price of Parle G, right? Because there's no elasticity as far as that play is considered, right? You don't have any margin. Sorry, you don't have any clearance to essentially change the price of that product. You cannot raise it, you cannot decrease it. So what these companies do is they shrinkflate, that they reduce the portion size, keep the price same, and that's how they save money, right? So even to counter that, they're negative shrinkflation. So they're going to raise the quantity, the portion size of their products, just so the what is it called? The benefits are passed on to the consumers. So don't worry about that, right? Now the question which comes on is like how much of it's gonna lead to actual growth for India, right? How much of it's gonna lead to actual real growth for India? Now that is a good question, and people often start talking about that. Hey, India cannot grow like China. India simply cannot grow like China, and because it's India's fault. So they say that India cannot grow like China because our culture, our democracy, our way of working, our bureaucracy, and so on and so forth. While that is obviously the case, the real reason why India cannot grow like China grew like 10, 20 years ago is because the world was very different, right? So in 2008, when the whole crash happened, the financial crash happened, uh, zero interest rate policy came, right? Money started flowing in all directions, in every way possible. And China was the beneficiary of that time. So, as a country, China was at the right place at the right time to take on all the money that was coming from all directions, right? So, China could grow like 10, 15, like extraordinary percentages compounding like every year. And before that, in 1990, when China was let into WTO, right? The global manufacturing, the whole offshoring play had just begun, right? And Japan fell right in 1990. That's when the Japanese economy crashed. So China found itself in the perfect storm of all the things right from 1990. So we missed the ZIP era, the zero interest rate policy era, because we were totally screwed, right? We were not doing anything, and we didn't have anything to basically make use of that particular play. We didn't attract any money. We were doing whatever the country was doing. Who knows? God knows. And in 1990 we liberalized in 1991, right after the whole Soviet Union essentially went out, right? So just when we were totally ruined, in that time is when we liberalized ourselves. Other than that, we were a socialist era economy. So the country has not been able to grow until now because the overall situations, just like we talked about a person's career, that things were beyond your control essentially. So it was beyond India's control, and just now we were looking at the China plus one strategy, right? Now that particular thing brought a lot of investment and money to India, the whole Make in India initiative. If something like that happens, you might just see India actually growing pretty fast as well. So they did 7.8 this quarter, 7.5 previous quarter, I guess. What the country wants to show is that it can grow at 8%, right? If it can grow at 8%, there's no other economy that an investor needs to look at. Essentially, that's the sell for the country by the people who are representing it right now. So I hope that makes sense. Moving on. Mr. Tiwari says, on rupees 100, how much GST can one collect for movie? 5 rupees. Well, mental workout, mathematics. Anyway, moving on. Uh, Industry must pass on to consumers, says Mr. Piyush Goyal. We'll talk about risk. Oh my God, you cannot believe the political conversations. But what's good news is the good news is that there's a 15-year plan to actually buy things for the defense industry, for the Indian Army, Navy, Air Force, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of UAVs. There's a lot of AI emphasis. There's a lot of direct energy weapons, space-based warfares, and so on and so forth. There's a whole list of things that the country has outlined as a 15-year plan for Indian defense. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency would know I've been very, very positive. I've been very hopeful that Indian defense industry actually leads to something, right? At the moment, we spend 1.9% of our GDP on defense, and that's not enough. The global average is somewhere around 3.5%. If we grow the defense industry, it's going to have cascading effects. We always talk about cascading effects. We talk about how nothing should be judged in a silo, right? Cascading effects of defense industry is that once you're working on defense, you cannot be outsourcing critical parts of that particular manufacturing play to an outside country, right? So you've got to be having a vertically integrated prowess as far as the whole value chain is considered. What happens with the vertical integration of that particular development is that a lot of opportunities get created at each part of the pyramid. Okay, so let's say if somebody is making extraordinary drones, right? Military drones, or unmanned aircrafts, fighter aircrafts. They have to have right from steel, right from glass, which is like the commodity of the commodity, right? Right from steel, glass, to an advanced software system. The country will have to figure out a way to do it itself, or like its own people. You cannot be outsourcing your unmanned air vehicle software to China, right? You understand? So because the nature of the military industrial complex is strategic, fundamentally, it will lead to a lot of cascading effects that lead to more manufacturing in different areas. So if you look at US as a history, right? Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all of these players have spun industries that are beyond everybody's control. Do you know Bosch and Lomb, the Ray-Ban manufacturer, Bosch and Lomb, the company? What did Bosch and Lomb do? It was actually making the, what is it called? The binoculars and the glass systems for weapons during the World War, right? All those tunnel visions you see, I'm forgetting the word for them. That's what Bosch and Lomb did while the war was going on. And that's how the company really flew. So you imagine the effects which are far reaching. So defense industry, a plan, India-Singapore to widen cooperation in defense tech and maritime security. So India is basically looking at, countering China's, presence in a particular strait, has been asking for patrols in the Strait of Malacca, along with Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia, given it as a contiguous state due to Andaman Islands as per MEA. So, Strait of Malacca patrol, one of India's long-standing demands to counterbalance Chinese presence in the region. So, a lot of scope as far as Indian defense is considered. We really need to make, that's something. German submarine manufacturer ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems is looking at a tech partner in India. So you can imagine, because India has a very long coastline. right? But despite that coastline, we don't have a shipbuilding industry, right? If you look at India and shipbuilding, it's nothing. China is the biggest shipbuilder of the world. Of course, China is biggest in everything. India is nowhere. Even America is talking about making American shipbuilding great again, right? Because they killed their industries. India has to start. So defense and maritime really need a lot of action. Moving on. IIT Madras stays on top. Nice. A lot of news related to GST which I don't want to cover because we've covered it all in like 100 episodes. We've been talking about this, so no point. But very interestingly, there's gonna be bad news for Swiggy and Zomato because they're gonna have like a 200 crore tax outgo due to the revised GST play. So until now, their delivery fee was essentially exempt from GST because it would pass through or whatever. Now that delivery fee will also be, 18% tax. Now, if the delivery fee gets 18% tax, you know, at a net level, the companies will actually be paying 150 crore to 200 crore tax on deliveries. Now, if that happens, the companies are saying that these costs will have to be borne by the users, by the consumers, or the workers, right? Or the workers, by the consumers or the workers. Consumers, it's fine, it's okay, right? It's okay. Consumers can take it. But does it click what we talked about the workers play? I said that the quick commerce, the jobs that quick commerce is creating is not that quick commerce is not creating jobs. It's creating traps, right? That's what we talked about. The delivery jobs that quick commerce is creating, these are not jobs, these are traps for people. You remember we talked about this very, very clearly? And we make sense because if you're looking for a job, what do you want? Let's say if you start at 2.5 lakh, 3 rupees at Infosys, 2.5 to 3 lakh rupees at Infosys or HCL as a kid, right? Straight out of college. There is a career path, there is a career track that, it's going to rise. You're going to do different things. You're going to travel. You're going to learn more. You're going to learn more skills. Those skills are going to be implemented across industries and so on and so on and so on, right? Even if you're joining the fast food industry, right? If you, let's say, join McDonald's and you are just a mopping guy at McDonald's, from the mopping guy, you can become a part of the kitchen counter, right? Kitchen counter, billing counter. You can actually be a part of the procurement, right? You can be part of the ops of the whole thing, right? So there is a career path. You can go up, right? You can learn new skills. You can make more money. You can develop yourself as a professional. Every play. Call center, you begin as a caller. You can be a team lead. Then you can be an ops manager. Then you can be a center head and so on and so forth. Every job is supposed to have a particular learning curve, a particular earning curve, right? A learning curve and earning curve. But what is the learning curve and earning curve for a delivery executive working at a quick commerce company? There is no learning curve, there is no earning curve, right? You're making 40 bucks a delivery. You got to deliver, let's say 20, make 20 deliveries, right? Oh, somebody put a tax on it. Sorry, now you're going to make 38. Oh, we're starting to make drone deliveries. Now you're going to make 35. Oh, the drone deliveries are really working for it. Now you're going to make 30. Oh, we're really scaling up the drone play. Now you're going to make 25. That is the earning curve. What happens to the learning curve? What did you learn being a delivery guy? What did you learn being a delivery guy at a dark store, quick commerce dark store, where you're just going to and fro in a 3.5 kilometer radius? You're going to the dark store, picking one stuff, going to the consumer, coming back. You're not even organizing the deliveries. You're not even seeing the tech do anything, right? It's not even making a route for you. It's not even a traveling sales there's an in operations research, there's something called traveling sales problem, right? Traveling salesman problem. So if you have like 10 deliveries, you organize your delivery time and you find out what is going to be the perfect route which is most efficient for you. But in a quick commerce play, there is no traveling salesman problem, right? You're going to go to and fro, to and fro. So what exactly did you learn while you were making money, right? How to drive and get to know your neighborhood. That's says Mr. Tiwari. But it's not, Mr. Tiwari, I'm so sorry, but it's not funny, unfortunately. So if you look at the youth which is coming to the country, they are they're just basically getting trapped in this job while they could be making a little less money in the beginning, doing something better which has a better opportunity to grow, right? Let's say if screwed quick commerce, the same guy was working as a sales executive for an FMCG player. A very difficult job, doesn't pay well, pays less than a delivery guy, right? But what that guy does is goes to the retailer, takes the stocking update, gives them the inventory, whatever. He works for the distributor. He is basically a sales guy for the retailer, right? Or the company, the FMCG company. A very, very difficult job, doesn't pay anything, right? But what's the learning curve? You talked to the retailers, you sold them your product, you talked about shelf space, you learned about the whole retail play, you learned about inventory control, you learned about margins, you learned about sales outreach costs, right? You created relationships with the network, you get transferred to another network, you do that, and so on and so on and so on, right? That's the learning curve for that guy. From that sales guy, he can go to being a sales manager, right? Where he can manage 4 people. Then he can go to being an sales ops manager, so some strategy guy. Then he can learn something, right? He can do an MBA that, hey, I was a feet on street sales guy, right? I promoted stuff, I sold to retailers. That's valuable experience, man. Where is the valuable experience as far as these delivery guys is considered? It's a trap. I should write an article about it, but I don't find the time. Mr. Batman says, there are a few programs which tries to bring them into actual full-time roles, but for a very small fraction of people, not really scalable. Well, that's just what I call, in my words, bullshit. Right? It's just posturing. Anyway, moving on. Fintechs, lenders see volume jump and so on and so forth. Drone startups to spend gains on R&D. We talked about it. State-run insurance likely to roll out zero tax policies. Good. Industry must pass on the GST gains to buyers, says Mr. Goyal, which is an answer to your question, Mr. Batman. Well, I'm feeling very awkward calling you Mr. Batman, but it is what it is, right? It's not who I am underneath. It's what I do that defines me. It's like, hey, why are you gargling marbles, man? Anyway, so, so we've talked a lot about this. The Niti Aayog is planning to cut pulses imports. We've talked about this. We've talked about yellow dals getting a lot of imports, due to which the domestic prices of yellow dal have crashed by 10 to 15%. Because they've crashed 10 to 15%, farmers are talking about protecting the domestic production by making sure that there's an import structure around yellow dals. Because then farmers don't have to grow it, right? If it doesn't make money, farmers will just simply avoid growing yellow dal, right? So the government, Niti Aayog, is essentially looking at some sort of a duty structure to prevent yellow dal pulses imports, right? Yellow dal is one of them. So pulses imports get curbed a little. The farm industry gets support, and that particular support is essentially very, very good for the bottom of the pyramid. Also, Niti Aayog is talking about 2D material, national programs for 2D material. 2D material is that semiconductor chip play, very, very refined, very precise. Exactly, let me just tell you. Introduction to 2D materials, developed by collaboration with IISc and so on and so forth. It is... Two-dimensional materials are crystalline substances with atomically thin structure and unique electronic, optical, and mechanical properties which are integral to the next generation semiconductors, memory, quantum devices, flexible electronics, and energy systems. So obviously, now this is what happens as a second order effect is considered. So if you would have listened to Raghuram Rajan, right, and he said that don't start the electronics manufacturing play, don't start the semiconductor manufacturing play. India should focus on services because that's where its strength lies. And whatever semiconductors we're going to make are going to be previous generation anyway. We're going to be laggards. It's not going to lead to anything. If you would have listened to that advice, you wouldn't have been looking at these second order effects, right? And that was very bad advice, and somebody should really investigate on why or how such a learned person, such a blue blood pedigreed person, IIT Delhi, MIT, and so on and so forth, could say something so stupid. I was almost gonna say the F word. But anyway, it needs to be judged, right? Thank God we didn't listen to that guy. Moving on. Amazon has acquired Bangalore fintech Axio in a 200 million deal. All the investors have exited. Coincidentally, Axio also raised 200 million. So nobody made any money. The company raised 200 million, got acquired for 200. In fact, they lost money, right? No, no. The company raised 200 million and it's going to exit all the investors. Amazon is going to get some sort of a fintech license through the company, the company was essentially a BNPL product, buy now pay later, didn't fly, never flew, right? But it got a lot of money. A lot of people became really rich, man, with the whole buy now pay later thing, and the cascading effects of that really hurt the country also in a very, very serious way, right? Because delinquencies of those loans was pretty high. So those kind of unsecured loans which were coming from all directions, they really screwed up the market in a lot of big ways, right? Glad that didn't work out. So when buy now pay later was happening, I wrote an article saying that this is not gonna fly because Klarna, by the way, US is still surviving. It's still, it's diversified. It's a good example of what has worked as far as buy now pay later is considered in US, and it got integrated with everything, right? But as such, when it came to India, and I said like, why are you having a buy now pay later play, right? It's the same offering as credit cards, right? So they told me that credit cards penetration is low. That's why buy now pay later makes sense, because India has a very, very low credit card penetration, just 2% or 3%. And I'm like, okay, but why is credit cards penetration low? What about that question? Because everybody who's eligible for a credit card is getting like called 6 times a day to get a free credit card. Why is credit cards penetration low? Is it the case that you are essentially looking at an economy which is not really pro credit cards in general, right? And if credit card penetration is low and credit cards have a similar offering, wouldn't that market also cover this play? So how is this industry making sense as an independent play, right? It's not. And those people say, the VC talk, and look what happened. So they were wrong. As always, they were wrong. Moving on. Earned wages in advance has been booming in US too, says Mr. Thurr. Like, earned wages in advance is not really a big of a problem in US, because there the salary, has a higher frequency. It doesn't come monthly. It's like a weekly wage kind of a play there, weekly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, or so on and so forth. So earned wage access is an okay thing. And in India, it makes sense, but again, it's a very, very small, very, very small market. So earned wage access platform, by the way, Refine, they raised like $100 million. And I'm like, this is totally screwed, man. $100 million. I did the math. Like, how many people in India essentially are working as employees totally? What's the total market? Let's say everybody in Refine's office, snorts cocaine for 8 hours a day, and manages to target every total like market possible. What can be its revenues, right? What is its valuation right now? It didn't make sense at all. And since then, it's just the company is not really going anywhere. It's a very small market. Moving on, TDK's lithium-ion battery plant in Haryana set for Q4 production. So that's happening. Lithium-ion battery. Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav says that we really need to have an infrastructure for all, the components. We've talked about this, that smartphones, he says, from glass to battery, from everything, we need to make Indian smartphone manufacturing value add to 38%, which is China's value addition to the smartphone play, 38%. Right now we are at 20%, he says. He says by 2030 we're going to be somewhere at 28% or 30%, and by 2035 we'll be equal to China. That is 38% of value addition as far as smartphone manufacturing is considered. And I'm like, sir, there is a problem in that analysis. What is the problem? The problem is that you're expecting that their value addition will be static in all those 9 years, right? That doesn't make much sense, don't you think? But anyway, Keynes Sanand OSAT unit to start production from 2026. A lot of action buzzing. OSAT is essentially outsourced semiconductor assembly and test. It's essentially an assembly unit. So OSAT unit beginning in Sanand. Moving on. India's diesel shipments to Europe surged 137% in August. Now that shouldn't be any surprise because Europe says it's not going to import anything in 2026. So it's a lot of front loading, some sort of maintenance operations in their refineries, in our refineries. So had to, put it there. Buyers stockpile ahead of EU's 2026 ban on fuels refined from Russian crude. So EU has had a ruling, no crude coming from Russian, no refined oil coming from Russian crude in 2026. So what people are doing, they're doing what they always do, right? They front load. Now if it's front loading, how does it actually help, right? Doesn't front loading of this particular export defeat the reason why this particular ban was put in the first place, right? If you put up a ban from 2026, we're not gonna import anything coming from there, and then what people start doing is that they send you next year stuff, or let's say next 4 months, 5 months stuff just before that deadline. Doesn't it like defeat the whole purpose? यार 2026 से नहीं लेंगे, उससे पहले जितना देना है दे दो जल्दी से, and so on and so forth. JP Parts liquidation is going to happen. We're going to talk about telcos are seeking clarity on name display in caller ID trials, right? They're saying that caller ID, how do you, if you're talking about every company needs to be caller ID'd, right? What about personal contacts? So I've always said telcos are being over regulated for the spam issue. It is like too bad. And most of spam which is happening nowadays is happening on OTT, right? WhatsApp and all. But that sector is not regulated this way. This is such a heavy way. We talked about how telemarketers were getting harassed with the whole DLT, mechanism. Very difficult. So that's what's happening. Rally can shrug off profit booking, but don't expect a smooth ride. So on. We've talked about this. Auto consumer reality among big winners. We know. Rate cut transmission to get a push as banking at 62,000 crores. CRR cut kicks in from Saturday. So that's cool. We've talked about this a lot. CRR cut to aid transmission of past rate cuts. Reliance on wholesale deposits expected to ease. Liquidity surplus 3 lakh crore. Downward reversions in deposit rates likely. Deposit rates are gonna go down. Once deposit rates are gonna go down, deposits are gonna go down, because Indian depositors, Indian public in general, is really going heavy on moving away from FDs to equities, right? And that's a big problem, because if they don't do FDs, right, and they go for equities, the bank doesn't have a proper deposit base, right? And if it doesn't have a proper deposit base, the cost of capital essentially gets wavered by a lot, right? And CASA, current account, savings account, in the whole credit rate, deposit rate ratio, that basically goes for a toss. So that is obviously a problem which is seen, but lending rates are also going down. So net interest margin is very important. What's the bank's money? Bank's money is the interest rate at its lend, at which it lends, and the interest rate it has to pay people for the deposits, right? That's the money, net interest margin. Deposits have not moved, and banks were very scared to move deposits because people are already not putting money in FDs. So if they reduce deposit rates, They're not gonna, it's gonna have further, let's say, attrition. But uh, interest rates are gonna come down because the rates have come down, due to which the net interest margin gets shrunk. How does this work for banks where people are heavy on equity and low on savings uh, deposits? Yeah, so that's what we discussed, Mr. Tiwari. That's what we were saying, right? That banks, it is a problem for banks because if they don't have a large deposit base, the cost of capital for them to lend actually changes in a lot of ways, right? So, for countries, oh, okay, I don't understand what you mean. How does this work for banks where people are heavy on equity and low on savings and deposits? I don't understand. I don't get it. You'll have to clarify a bit on your question. Coca-Cola knows how to react to short-term attack. Uh, Loans become expensive. Like US have low savings culture. So it's the market play, right? The invisible hand, Adam Smith's invisible hand. What it does, it basically people finds different ways to park money, and bank finds different ways to get money, right? So that's how it works. It's like things have to manage themselves, right? Net interest margins have to come down, net interest margins have to go up. The equities, if they are so attractive, sometimes the equities start crashing, and if equities crash all of a sudden, suddenly you're gonna see everybody putting all the money in FDs. So the markets correct themselves, right? Coca-Cola knows how to react to short-term attacks, says its chief. Lahori, Jeera, and so on and so forth. A lot of Aurora, Lemon, and all of these players have really, like made a dent as far as whole play is considered. So that's what's going on. GST, travel industry packs its back. 7,500 room is now at 5% GST, man. Come on. Come on. It's so nice. So that's that, ladies and gentlemen. That is that. We have covered a lot of stuff, and we've ended early today. I'm done. We've not left anything out. I hope you had fun at the 103rd episode of Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis, which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. We're gonna punch in sometime, 9:03. I hope you have a beautiful day, personally and professionally. I'll see you tomorrow, same place, same time, hopefully. But before we say bye, you can ask questions because we have a few minutes, right? We generally end at, let's say, 9:07, 9:08, 9:10, sometimes even more. So we can solve questions. We can take questions. Interesting things happening as far as the AI play is considered, right? Very, very heavy things happening as far as AI play is considered. So a lot of people are saying that AI essentially is a roundup of internet in 1990. Mr. Batman says, what do you think about E20 fiasco? Ethanol 20. We've talked a lot about it, actually, Mr. Batman. Sorry, Mr. Wayne. But we've already talked a lot about it. Unless somebody else also has that question. So E20 is a great thing for India. India's biggest problem is that it's an import heavy country, and most of what we import is crude, right? And we need to somehow reduce the import of crude because it bankrupts us, it drains our forex, it drains our GDP, right? So we got to somehow find a way to replace crude. How do you replace crude? You lower your energy consumption. How do you lower your energy consumption? By this Ujjwala Yojana, right? The country essentially replaced all incandescent lights by CFLs and then by LEDs, just so they can reduce the energy bill, right? Then they started talking about ACs, that you won't have below 20 degrees for ACs, because for every degree you go lower, you have to spend 6% more on energy, right? So that way, so you can reduce the bill, right? That's gonna cut your import. You can start doing alternate energy, like renewable, like solar, wind, and so on and so forth. Wind is bad, but solar, right? And other nuclear, right? That's number 2. Number 3 is what? To make sure that you have reduced dependence, you can have an alternate fuel replacing the whole play of the vehicular consumption of crude, the petrol and diesel product, and that is where ethanol comes in. So ethanol solves two problems. It solves the problem of increasing imports. It solves the problem of agriculture sector being a laggard, right? Because where does ethanol come from? It comes from agri waste, right? So if you can have ethanol coming from and helping agriculture share in GDP, or agriculture's productivity in GDP rising up from, let's say, 19% to 22%, people making more money in agriculture, that's a win-win. So it wins this side, where the supply side wins, the agri guys win, the farmers win. It wins on this side, the country wins because it has to import less of the whole thing. And then it wins on the environment side because ethanol has less emissions, right? So ethanol is a win-win. Moving on the learning curve, do you think learning and career acceleration manifests the way you said it in other jobs? For example, children of some of our house help also end up doing the same. Well, that's an education question. Mr. Aman Killa asks. Of course, people who are, we grow. An apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? When we talk about social mobility, we don't talk about access, right? We don't talk about exposure, right? Social mobility often comes from the exposure. So if you look at rich kids today, they came from rich kids of yesterday, most of them, right? And in different ways, the mobility happens. The rich get richer, poor get poorer, and so on and so forth. So the exposure needs to be proper, right? And that way, it makes sense. The learning curve, the earning curve, it needs to, and just look at how it contrasts with the gig workers of urban company. Now these people are very different from delivery workers, right? They're actually learning a skill. So if there's a beautician, if there's a makeup lady, right, or a makeup guy, not being sexist here, anybody, let's say there's a massage guy, that's a skill, man. That's a job. That's an art, right? That's a proper there's a learning curve, there's an earning curve there as well. And it happens across the board, right? But just this whole delivery thing, and that too hyper local delivery, it's not even intelligent logistics. It's just, there's nothing there, right? Moving on. Yeah, so we were talking about AI. Yeah, so we're pretty much done. I can take more questions, like 2 minutes. We have 9:10. We stop. Right. Today, by the way, is Teachers' Day, which is very special. Happy Teachers' Day to all of you. Teachers have shaped everything. I love my teachers, and I love cinema because I've learned a lot from cinema, and I've learned a lot from books. And today is also my father's birthday. So happy birthday to my father. Touch wood. So that's that, ladies and gentlemen. I think we should leave now. We don't have many questions. And I hope I have questions answered Mr. Batman's and Mr. Killa's question properly. I'll see you tomorrow. Same place, same time, hopefully. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.